Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and Casey. I'm Brad Carlyon, your Navajo County attorney, and my usual partner, Sheriff Casey Clark, couldn't be with us today because duty called for him. But our guests for this segment of Shooting Straight are Theresa and Greg with Alice's Place, the domestic violence shelter up in Winslow, Arizona that serves northern Navajo County. And we thought with October being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, who better to have as guests than Theresa and Greg. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Brad.
Well, one of the big topics going on in the county is the closure of the White Mountain Safe House. And there's a lot of concern about that down south. Is there anything Alice's Place can do to help with the void that's going to be caused by the loss of the White Mountain Safe House?
Alice's Place has for several years actually provided services in this area. We're just not as well known in this area because of our geographic location in Winslow. But we do a lot of non-residential, or a lot of people are calling that mobile advocacy these days. And that's really our grassroots. That's how Alice's Place started. We do have a shelter. We actually have 2 shelter locations. And that began about 5-6 years ago. But the mobile advocacy, traveling, that, like I said, is our grassroots. And that's where we're going to really be able to step in this area. When there are individuals that are calling for help, of course, if our shelter has bed availability, we will definitely bring them in. If that's not an option, we can also participate in helping these individuals and their families relocate to something safer. We've been doing this for many years. We travel all over the state of Arizona. We've gone into parts of New Mexico. And so I believe we're going to be working a little closer with the sheriff in Navajo County, as well as with victim services, and trying to help meet that need out here.
You know, Brad, there's another way that we can be out there, just like this, being more known as far as where we are and what our phone number is, and getting that information out, you know, so that because we still have 24/7 hotline calls. We are advocates that will take those calls and be able to help and guide 24 hours a day. So that's one thing that we still have to offer. So we would just like to, at some time, be able to put those numbers out so that if someone needs some help, they don't have to hunt around for it and can call us immediately, and they'll get immediate help.
You know, I just realized I failed to have you guys introduce yourselves and the roles that you play. Theresa, why don't you let everybody know what you do for Alice's Place?
I am the executive director with Alice's Place. I do, however, wear many hats because we are a small program. So in addition to the duties of executive director, I do participate in taking calls on our hotline and do some advocacy.
Well, I'm a chiropractor in Winslow and have been for 38 years, and I'm not plugging my business, but Alice's Place became my passion after a time. I was a board member, I was founding board member, and I just thought I was one of those guys that made good decisions, you know, but it turns out that after I saw what Alice's Place actually does, I've been with them since the year 2000. So we plan on expanding and continuing to do what we can as far as that money lets us do that. And so I'm proud to be a part of Alice's Place.
In September, in the Linden area, there was a very tragic incident of domestic violence. A husband shot his wife in front of their child and then shot himself. So that's an extreme case of domestic violence. But what is considered domestic violence that would get you guys involved?
You know, domestic violence, we also bring in family violence under that umbrella. So it's the individuals that call and seek services through us, a lot of times there is physical abuse that has been involved, and sometimes it's emotional abuse, financial abuse. there's a lot of different types of abuse that falls under domestic violence. And a lot of people think of domestic violence, they think of what we call IPV, which is intimate partner violence, when in fact it could be other family members, it could be a boyfriend, a husband, a sister, a parent, a child, if we're working with someone who is older. And so all of these types of abuse are under the umbrella of the individuals that we work with. We also help individuals that present their situation would be more sexual assault, stalking. We have done teen dating abuse awareness. We have teen sexual assault working with the schools in Winslow. So
we would think that everyone knows about what domestic violence is because it's talked about so much, but I think the important thing is re-education and re-education. And the one things that surprised me when I got involved was it can be as much as holding back money from a spouse, whether it be a male or female, holding that back, and that person never knowing how to write a check or knew where their money was in their bank. And so that's an abuse too. So there's emotional abuse and sexual abuse and financial abuse. There's a whole gamut of things. And I think people just have to realize that if they feel victimized in some way,
Yes.
that's the abuse. Maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as regardless of what type of abuse the individual is experiencing, it really comes down to the dynamic of control. And so anyone who works in this field or has anything to do in this field understands the power and control will, but that really is at the heart of what abuse is. The abuser in that situation is, whether it's through physical, emotional, financial isolation, it is the need to have control in that situation is what's driving a lot of that abuse. So when individuals come to us, a lot of times we're asked, do you think I'm going to succeed? Do you think I can make it? And the first thing we tell them is, you picked up the phone and you called, you dared to see that you could be in a better situation, and right there you're successful.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of statistics out there that we can quote, but one of them being, it takes on average 7 times for a victim of abuse to leave before they leave for good. So, and it's one of those things, we do see that. We see recidivism into the program, and eventually we know that one day that person is going to beat those odds. We're always hopeful on that.
So the people that call for your services, are they typically have police officers there at the time, or are those just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a much broader group that are being victimized in a domestic situation, and they're the ones that call on you, or a combination of the both?
A combination, but I would say that the individuals coming to us through law enforcement would be a very, very small percentage. So quite often there's been past law enforcement interaction. We have officers that tell us, hey, we give your information out all the time, we give your cards out, your brochures, and they may just not be ready at that time. But when someone is calling into the program, we receive calls through our hotline from law enforcement, from medical centers. We respond to the emergency rooms in our area. But I would say at least 80%, if not better, of our calls coming in are coming directly from the individual who's made that decision that they have to do something different. They have to get out of the situation they're in.
Brad, I'd like to just let you know that I know some people know this, but we serve male victims as well. Sometimes it could be elderly male, a father or grandfather, but some men are victimized. Some men are victims of domestic violence. And we do take those calls, and we do service those type of men, and to be able to guide them in the direction they need to go. And so I just wanted to put that forth, because sometimes that's misunderstood.
I think the rate of abuse against men are much greater than we actually see, because it is not the socially acceptable thing to do for a man to call for help. But we do get those calls, and when we do, every part of our services are made available as they are to anyone else who calls through.
So somebody calls you, what services do you have available to assist these people?
Well, shelter, of course, but we have a finite number of beds, and when they're full, they're full. But shelter is one piece of what we do. We do, again, the mobile advocacy part. We do a lot of transportation. A mobile advocacy is basically meeting the person where they're at. We have a community-based office, so we have people, individuals who come into our office. Maybe shelter isn't what they need, but they need us to attend a court hearing with them. Court accompaniment, law enforcement advocacy, just helping people find resources. Sometimes what they need, especially individuals who have not been in the world of social services. It could be an individual who's not had the need to have food stamps or cash assistance or
TANF for their children,
Exactly.
Just milk for their children. Yeah.
And so you have individuals, especially when there is a parent with children who they're trying to leave and trying to figure out how do they get to that next step. And sometimes it does require shelter. Sometimes it just requires meeting with a case manager or an advocate to help them get to these resources, educate them what is available, help them through the maze. It's not always easy to navigate some of these places.
So for a lot of them, it's resources to transition them from being controlled into taking control and getting a job and supporting themselves and their children.
Exactly. We do financial management classes. We have workplace skills classes that we do. But the transportation piece, I started to talk about that, is a really big part of what we do. And a lot of that is because we are in a rural area. I know out here you guys have a line that goes, I think, from Pine Top Lakeside into Holbrook, but even that's limited. And then there's absolutely nothing in Winslow as far as public transportation goes. We don't even have Greyhound that stops there. So we're receiving calls from communities that could be up to 90 to 100 miles away from us looking for shelter. And if we didn't have the ability to go and pick them up, they don't have a way to get in. There's a lot of individuals that come into shelter from the nearby, from Navajo Nation, for example, and the homes out there are even much more isolated than us in the rural areas are used to. And so this is a big piece of what we do. It's not uncommon for us to be traveling out in this area to either bring services to someone here or to pick someone up to bring them to services that they need, whether it's shelter with us, taking them to court. It's just part and parcel of being a program in a rural area.
When we are able to house them, our program is a 90-day program, which includes all the advocacy. And we talk about advocacy, and some people don't understand that, but to be able to help and guide people to where they need to go, whether it be to go to the DES or child care or any of those little pieces. And during that time, someone may leave sooner than 90 days, of course. Maybe they don't want to stay here and go with a family member or someone else.
Find housing.
Yes, but what we do is then help them into a different situation, finding housing, that kind of thing, or simply finding a job. So those are the good things that Alice's Place does when we can house someone.
what we call lay legal advocacy, which is different than legal advocacy. We don't do any kind of legal advice. We can do referrals to, for example, White Mountain Legal Aid. But the lay legal advocacy, we will take them to help them to get an order of protection. We'll go out on civil assist to help them get their belongings back. If there is hearings involved, if there was a criminal case attached to this.
Yeah.
You've met with me a few times on
We
those.
have met a few times, yeah. We go to court with them. There's not a whole lot we can do in court other than sometimes we're just that person to sit by them and help them be a little less nervous, or that they know there is someone on your side, someone who is really rooting for our client. We can help them with their victim impact statement. Just basically navigate an otherwise complicated system. And when you're in trauma and you're in fear, it's hard to stay focused. So that's another piece of what we do.
Are there things that somebody who's been a victim of domestic violence can do to help prepare themselves to leave if that situation
Definitely.
comes? Because it sounds like you get many who just leave with no
Yes.
plan, nothing.
Right.
Are there steps or things they can do in preparation to make that transition easier?
Yes, and these are things that we actually touch on when we get the phone calls, if they haven't already left. And we will go through safety planning and what we call exit strategy, which simply means how to keep themselves safe, gathering their documents together.
What kind of documents?
This would be a driver's license, bank cards, birth certificates,
And their children's.
their children's school records, the CIBs, Certificate of Indian Blood. Nothing is required to come into shelter, but a lot of what these items are required to establish resources, to look for housing, to get a job. They're all things that can be, that we can help them replace. It's not at all uncommon for us to go to the MVD with them to replace an ID that they had to leave behind. Social Security to get their cards, birth certificates. But if they gather them ahead of time and have them ready, it helps the transition. It makes that transition much easier, and you're more productive on your time. Instead of waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks to get all of your documents replaced, you have everything, and you can start working on a goal and action plan right away. We remind them the things that when you're not in trauma, when you're not standing in fear like that, facing that kind of decision of leaving the home you've been at, it's easy for you to think it through logically and go, okay, I need to pack this and I need to pack that. But logic goes out the window when you're in trauma like that. So we literally tell them, if you're coming into shelter with us, we have hygiene products. You don't have to bring anything, but
have
if you have something
clothes.
specific you want to bring, do.
And clothes.
Bring your clothes, but we do have a thrift store to help them rebuild their wardrobe. We remind them if they have children, if there's a favorite blanket, a favorite toy, something that gives that child comfort, don't forget that behind, if you can. It's very common when we are first meeting someone coming into shelter that if they're fortunate, they might have thrown some things in a trash bag. We've had people come in where they didn't even have a full set of clothes on and nothing with them. So you get all levels. And then we have individuals who come in and we're like, hey, we don't have storage space for everything that you brought. So we also have to remind them that, please don't bring your furniture, we can't store your TVs. But we do help them go through, try to help them concentrate. But more than just that, when is the right time to leave? Does the abuser work? Can you leave when they're working? Have this safety plan set up ahead of time where we have an advocate that knows where are we going to meet you. Do we need to meet you with an officer, or is it going to be safe for us to meet you without
Don't
an
push those
officer?
buttons, right?
Yes. Yes, and don't talk. And the big thing I tell them, even people you trust, even your most loyal friends and family, if you're working on an exit strategy, don't tell anybody.
Why?
Because even it's like any other secret. The more it's told, the higher chance it's going to get out. Even if it's not meant to harm someone, if the abuser finds out that you are preparing to leave, that you're making this plan and you're still there, that could really escalate. If there's physical abuse involved, the physical abuse is probably going to escalate much greater. If it's been just verbal or emotional abuse, it could escalate into physical abuse, because that's when going back to the power and control, that's the point that they realize they're starting to lose that control, and they're willing to do just about anything to get that back. It's the most dangerous time for an individual in a domestic violence situation is when they first leave. That's a lot of times why we are telling them, don't tell anyone where you're going. Get settled, let's get a plan in place, and then let's watch and see what happens. Is this abuser going to try to stalk you? Are they going, you never know what the reaction's going to be. But that really is when, I don't know statistics on murders offhand, but I do know that for Alice's place, our shelter, Laura's house, is named after Laura Kislingberry, a local family. And in 1981, Laura left her husband, and he had threatened her and said, if you leave me, I'm going to kill you. And she did leave after there was a much horrific abuse. And he went through with that. And he knew where to find her. He shot her.
And that's with family members there, people knew, and
in our little town of Winslow, it was just such a horrific event in 1981. 30 years later, it was December of 1981, 30 years later in December is when we opened Laura's house, our shelter, and dedicated it in her memory. But that just shows the danger that's involved when they are leaving. So we make sure that we try not to sugarcoat too much. We give someone a false sense of security, and that could lead to dangers. We don't want to make them too fearful. We don't want to make them so fearful that they don't leave. So we try to find that balance between getting a good plan in place, telling them what they need to look for, to be safe, to get out of there, have code words with the children. We had one family that we worked with, a mom with 2 children, and the code word that she set up with her children, we had helped her with this. When she got ready to leave, she would tell them Care Bear. And when she said Care Bear, they knew to walk out of the house and go get in the car. Don't ask any questions, just go get in the car. A few minutes later, she ran out with what she could take and took off. And he was sleeping. So these are...
it sounds like really serious things, Brad, and they are serious subjects.
Yes.
The wonderful thing are the successes, and we don't know about all the successes. We don't hear about the person that we sent all the way across the country that she got to New York. Once in a while, we'll get a phone call and say thank you. But sometimes we know what happens to them, and that's when it's very rewarding.
Because mainly what we hear are the really tragic stories.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's just
Exactly.
the extreme examples. There's so many more that
Yes.
are successful.
That's what
and
we
they
want to
can
put out
start
there to
new
people,
lives.
that there's a chance. Go ahead and take that chance. Come make
Yes.
that call.
And take control of your life back.
Exactly.
Our time has just flown by.
Sure.
So I want to thank you both
Thank you
for
very
joining
much.
us today on Shooting
Thank
Straight.
you.
And thank you for You had something else?
Well,
Greg?
yeah, just that
Please.
our phone number, hotline number is 928-289-3003.
And we'll have that showing across the
Thank you.
screen so anybody who can use your services or another DV Coalition
Yes.
services will be able to do it.
Thank you.
But once again, thank you for joining us for this month on Shooting Straight with Brad and Casey. We hope to see you next month, and stay tuned for this month's Most Wanted. Thank you.
The Navajo County Sheriff's Office is currently seeking the location of Terry Lee Daughtry. Terry is wanted on a felony warrant out of Navajo County Sheriff's Office from original charges of possession of dangerous drugs. Terry has been evading contact from law enforcement for the past few months and has not been able to be located in the lakeside area. Terry should be considered dangerous and a fugitive from law enforcement. The Navajo County Sheriff's Office is currently seeking the location of Juan Jesus Ali. Juan is wanted on a felony Navajo County warrant from original charges of probation violation and theft of a credit card. Juan has been evading contact from law enforcement for the past few months and has not been able to be located in the Pinetop Lakeside area. Juan should be considered dangerous and a fugitive from law enforcement. If anyone has any information about the location of Terry Lee Daughtry or Juan Jesus Ali, we encourage you to contact the Navajo County Sheriff's Office at 928-524-4050 or WeTip at 1-800-78-CRIME. A reward may be offered.